Hello and good morning and welcome into the newest episode of Big Talk College Sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I am your host, Sam Sprunger, and as always, Tony Hollinsworth. How are we this morning?
I'm doing great, although apparently I have found out that each and every time that I post a video about somebody on my own personal page, especially about a specific sports team or a coach, I seem to really rattle that fan base. At first it was Alabama, the latest group is Clemson. And apparently I've been told if I know so much that I should be the coach. I'm just saying it hasn't popped up on LinkedIn or Indeed yet, but when it does,
You're
by
applying
God,
for it.
I will be the next head coach of Clemson University. My NCAA 25 resume backs it up. I'm a 7-time national champion.
Wow.
7 times.
You're already into the 2030s now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. So 7-time national champion. Have you won it every season since you started, basically?
Sure have.
Yep. You're the
I've-
next Nick Saban.
I have 5 top 5 recruiting classes. I get almost every 5-star I look for. Full key positions. Depth like unbelievable.
Why wouldn't Clemson want you?
I
Probably
know.
because you toy around with that transfer portal.
Funny enough, I've only ever gotten 6 players out of the transfer portal. Nobody ever wants to come play for me because I just recruit so well. Dabo could learn a thing or two.
Well, no, I think he does a fine job recruiting. It's the transfer portal that he's refusing to grasp onto. But I'm not worried about Clemson fans. They're not listening anyways, Tony.
Right, and not unless they become part of the Big Ten, which who knows? Maybe they do, maybe they don't.
A few years, that may be a thing.
Anything's
maybe we
possible.
will be covering the Clemson Tigers as an in-conference game. But we working overtime this week because we did a Sunday show this week and talked about the BCS or the BCS. Good Lord, where in the world did that come from?
See, we want the BCS. We need the BCS. We're just not getting it, unfortunately.
Well, what I saw actually the reason why that's been even crawling around in my noggin here is I saw what would the brackets look like if they went with the BCS formula, and it would look very different. But we did the CFP. There we go. The CFP bracket reaction on Sunday. Talked about the Big Ten teams involved in that bracket. Kind of the overall our likes and dislikes and things like that. But today we are going with. We're going to preview the Big Ten bowl games. So there are 8 non-playoff teams participating in bowl season from the Big Ten, and we're going to look at those games. And there's not a lot of breakdown because you don't know who's playing. You might know some that have entered the transfer portal, but we just don't know exactly what roster these teams are going to be going with because you have opt-outs for seniors that decide they're wanting to make sure they don't hurt themselves. See Jalen Smith from Notre Dame years ago in the Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State.
Yep.
That was kind of where where people started taking their cue to say, you know what, I'm going to step out. I think Christian McCaffrey was the first major player to say, you know what, I'm going to forego my bowl game and make sure I'm ready for the NFL draft that next season. So and Jalen Smith blew out every tendon in his knee and lost. I believe he went in the 2nd round or maybe even the 3rd round to the Cowboys. I was going to say I thought it was at least. I knew he wasn't a first rounder. He was projected to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. Ended up going midway, I think, through the 2nd round to the Cowboys, and he cost himself millions of dollars. And Christian McCaffrey started the snowball. Now we get into the season where it's like. A couple years ago when Purdue went to the Citrus Bowl and got just absolutely curb stomped by LSU because Aiden O'Connell and Charlie Jones and all of their offensive power didn't play in their bowl game. They ended up
Hmm.
losing, I think, like 63-6 or something like that.
Yeah, it
Something
was pretty ugly.
stupid.
Yeah, it was pretty ugly.
It's almost 2024 Purdue bad. That was how bad it was.
Was that the
But
beginning of the end for Purdue football? Was that the game?
Well, yeah, because Jeff Brom left at that time as
Yeah,
well.
it went to
And
Louisville.
so his brother coached Purdue in the Citrus Bowl. That was when Drew Brees was an honorary coach for the day or whatever.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was Ryan Walters was named, and the rest is history. We actually they do have a new coach. They hired Barry Odom out of UNLV, so he foregoes his bowl game
Hmm.
to move on to Purdue and take over the Boilermakers. And I've seen some statements about, well, they could have went after somebody like in the lower tier. Hey, everybody's a gamble right now. And you know what? The one thing I would say about Ryan Walters is he may turn out to be a fantastic coach at some point.
Hmm.
He just took over a major program. I'm not even saying Purdue is a majorly successful program, but they're a program inside a major, well, the biggest conference in college football, and it was his first ever head coaching job. That's an awful tall order to take on, and he may turn out to be a fine coach. He just wasn't ready at this time, and it really overtook him.
Yeah,
And
because I
so,
mean,
go ahead.
I say because I mean, you have to look at who Ryan Walters faced in his first year as the Purdue head coach. You pretty much had to deal with the soon-to-be national champion Michigan Wolverines. You had to deal with a basically top three team in Ohio State. You had to deal with Penn State. So they have an absolute gauntlet they have to run every single year with all the teams that they've had to face, and not just the Big Ten East, but the craziness that is the Big Ten West. You've got Nebraska, you've got Minnesota, you've got Wisconsin, you've got Iowa. So I mean, even I remember a couple of years ago when we talked about it, that entire division was up for grabs, and
Oh
we're
yeah.
just sitting here like, okay, well, really it's anybody's game because we would watch the Big Ten West, we'd see one team get really hot, and we're like, it's theirs to lose, and sure enough, they
Yep.
would lose it to somebody else. So I do agree. I think Ryan Walters has a chance to be a really good coach. And it's obvious he's a really good coordinator because of what he was able to do with the University of Illinois and Brett Bielema there. So it kind of ties back into what I've said a lot of times for players when they come out of a really good college and then they go into the NFL and they're like, oh, he's a bust. No, it matters where you go and what you're surrounded by. The same thing we've talked about with Mike Locksley of the fact that when you go to some of these teams, you're not always going to have the Coach Signetti year of being able to bring guys in and kind of have a magical season. And being realistic, IU had a pretty easy schedule, but much like we talked about, they played who they played and they only lost one game. There's only so much you can do with that. And realistically, the same with Purdue. They're going to have those games that they lose. They can only control what they can control. So I do think Ryan Walters potentially maybe he gets another shot and maybe he doesn't. I think if he has another couple of years to prove himself as a defensive coordinator again, which I think is very realistically possible, I think if he potentially goes to maybe a better job or maybe even start in the group of five and kind of work your way up, because I obviously look at Barry Odom and his history. He was the head coach of Missouri at one point, ended up getting fired, had to go back to being a coordinator a little bit. Then he goes to UNLV, becomes a head coach, and now he's back to being a head coach of a Power 4 conference team.
And there was some criticizing of, well, he couldn't cut it in the SEC, so he went to UNLV. Well, but look at what he did in UNLV for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
He was 19-8 with 2 championship game appearances. That's
Mm-hmm.
a pretty big, and he was nationally ranked. And they may still have been even after they got beat by Boise State in the
Mm-hmm.
championship game. But and are they in the WAC? Is that what they're in? The
Who's
Western
that?
Athletic, Boise State and UNLV. Is that who they're?
Oh, they're in the Mountain West.
Mountain West. That's what
Yep.
it is.
Yep.
So like 2 Mountain West championship appearances for Barry Odom for a program like UNLV who had really struggled lately.
Mm-hmm.
He has the ability to be at least not a stink pot. A stink pot when it comes to being the next coach.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Purdue decided they weren't going to take a flyer on another unknown. I don't think they could have afforded to. The athletic director Babinski just could not do it again and miss on another unknown entity. At least with Barry Odom, he says, "Hey, I've got a guy here that can come in. He's proven that he can do it at UNLV, and it's very possible he could do good things in West Lafayette starting next year." So they have some guys that they're going to try to get back out of the portal, because it seemed like everybody and their brother went into the portal from Purdue. I think they said with still commits being out, but including all transfer, they had 37 open scholarship spots. Still, and that's, but and it is possible. I saw that they did get one of their guys that went into the portal, came back, rescinded it, and jumped out and came back to Purdue. So their goal is to try to bolster him up, and maybe Odom brings some running rebs with him to West Lafayette.
Yeah.
But okay, well, that's I guess I wasn't intending on spending the first 8 minutes of today's episode talking about Purdue hiring their new coach, but it is exciting to at least have that unknown hope, because you know what? You do have the likes of Kirk Signetti. Not saying that Odom's going to repeat or replicate exactly, but there is a chance that he could have that at least for the first year, that hidden elixir to turn Purdue around. So it might be something that Boilermaker fans have something to look forward to, at least until opening kickoff next year.
Right.
Well, hopefully at Media Days, Barry Odom doesn't come on and go, "I'm the coach of Purdue. We're in West Lafayette, Indiana," because,
I say, which would you rather have? Would you rather have that, like, yeah, we're an engineering school up in northern Indiana, or the, hey, we're Purdue, Indiana sucks, Michigan sucks, so does Ohio State. Just copy Coach Signetti to a T. And then you could throw out, be like, hey, by the way, Ohio State sucks, and we're in West Lafayette, Indiana.
Yeah,
nice to meet you guys.
All right, well, let's look at the bowl season for the Big Ten. We've got 8 games that are not the playoffs. So there are 4 teams in the playoffs. So 12 teams from the Big Ten make it to postseason play, Tony. That's a pretty impressive amount of teams. Now, granted, there are 6 that didn't, but that's 2/3 of the conference is playing postseason football.
And can I make a real quick note before we go super in depth into this? Can we make the Music City Bowl?
I don't know that we're going super in depth in any of this, but sure.
Hey, we never know. We never know. Anything can happen on Big Talk.
That's right. That's right.
Can we make the theme for the Music City Bowl black and yellow by Wiz Khalifa, since we have the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Mizzou Tigers? Just make the whole entire, just play black and yellow the entire
They need
time.
to bring in the fake turf that's all black with yellow. That probably gives somebody some headaches.
I say, yeah, you're talking to the colorblind guy, man. I'd be trying to focus. I'd be losing people on the field.
You'd be losing players in the field. Yeah, it would be ugly. No, the black and yellow. Yeah, that's a good theme song, especially for the Music City. Is that way you chose it?
They say Music City. I mean, not really. The fact that it's Music City just kind of ties in. I'm like, oh, black and yellow, black and yellow.
What would have been great is if those 2 teams would have played in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, because the Duke's Mayo logo is black and yellow.
There we go. That would have been perfect. That would have been perfect.
But let's look at some of these. Like I said, we're not going to be able to get hugely in depth. We're going to be able to give maybe a synopsis of what we hope to see, but these teams are going to look a bunch different come December 26th when Rutgers and Kansas State kick off at the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. That all 16 of these teams could just be a shell of what they were. Now, there are going to be some, like Nebraska. There's going to be some of those players at Nebraska that maybe are more worried about making sure they're in the portal or whatever, but they're going to also be in their first bowl game since 2015. But let's look at the really quick breeze through of some of these. The Guaranteed Rate Bowl, December 26th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights take on Kansas State Wildcats. I honestly, I don't even know where the Guaranteed Rate Bowl is. I'm going to guess somewhere in Arizona, or maybe is it the Sun Bowl?
I have no idea. Yeah, if I'm having to go off of like what you probably are of looking at the picture, I'm going to say probably somewhere in the desert. And we know Las Vegas is taken, so
Right.
I'm probably going to go with Arizona. Yeah.
Where is the Guaranteed Rate Bowl? Oh, jeez. There it is. It is at Chase Field in Arizona. So
Okay.
yes, that's.
So you're both right.
Yeah. So it's not the Sun Bowl, which is in El Paso, but I don't. Rutgers played pretty well at the end of the season, so I think this is one of those. Let's back it up just a little bit. For the most part, these are guaranteed practices. That's why these teams still choose to participate in these bowl games. They get a trip to a place like Nebraska and Boston College. They get to go to Yankee Stadium and play a football game there. They get to go have a bowl experience.
Mhm.
Those players get what? Couple more weeks, 3 weeks more of practice. So that's why the coaching staff, even if there are major players that aren't playing in these games, they're going to want to still do this to A, get the experience of the postseason, B, get those awesome amounts of practices in, because if you don't, you're in the off season. You don't get as many practice hours during the off season. So you want your season to continue as long as possible. So some of these games when we're like, I don't know, at least they're getting the practices in, and it's always fun. I always liked watching bowl games because you would many times not see these teams play at one another. You know, and they're not going to schedule them. If they do, it's not very often.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those that, you know, and how many times are you going to see South Carolina and Illinois play? Which honestly, that could be a really good football game if the teams stay mostly intact. That Citrus Bowl is going to be a fun one.
I feel like South Carolina, Illinois. Honestly, I feel like North Carolina, or not North Carolina. Why am I saying that? Nebraska, the other end. Nebraska and Boston College are also going to be really good. Not just because it's in Yankee Stadium, but I mean the same thing. These are teams that haven't been to the bowl games in quite a hot minute. Right. This is also one you have two former NFL coaches going up against one another that are trying to rebuild their programs. You know, Bill O'Brien, I feel like, took Boston College, I'm not going to say necessarily to the next level, but they did win a couple more games than what I probably expected them to this season. And they gave people a lot of fits as they were going through. And then we think, you know, not only because Matt Rule was able to get them, you know, to a bowl game for the first time in almost 10 years, but the fact that at one point we really thought, okay, if Nebraska can really start picking up on this and picking up on this heat and momentum, this is going to be a really dangerous Nebraska team. Now, they ended up ultimately falling short of where I think both of our expectations were. But nonetheless, though, much to your point, these kids are going to be coming in. None of these seniors have ever been to a bowl game before. So for them, I think they're going to do it. And they may not play a whole quarter. They may play like a drive or a series or two, and then they'll probably be done for the day. Like you said, it's more of a practice thing for your freshmen that you have now, maybe even some sophomores that probably haven't gotten some snaps. Like, okay, let's see what you guys got against their freshmen and their sophomores to see, all right, what do we have potentially for next season?
Of these 8 games, so we're going to look at, we're talking about the Guaranteed Rate Bowl between Rutgers and Kansas State. The Las Vegas Bowl between Southern Cal and Texas A&M. Still sounds weird to say that's a Big Ten
matchup.
But then you have Nebraska, BC, or Boston College, like we just talked about in the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. We talked about Iowa, or we mentioned Iowa, Missouri in the TransPerfect Music City Bowl. Michigan and Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa on December 31st. Might be an interesting game, but I think it's going to be one of those that's going to be, it's not going to be the equivalent Alabama that you would have gotten if they would have somehow managed to get into the playoff. But a Michigan team that maybe wants to make a statement with a win over a nationally recognized team again, like Alabama, might be an interesting game to watch. Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, there it is. That's Washington and Louisville. Oh, I like Louisville a lot. I like Jeff Brom as a coach, and he always brings a high flying offense to wherever he goes. And the Cardinals have a big time offense. It could be a long day for the Huskies if the Cardinals can get going right. In the Citrus Bowl, the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, South Carolina and Illinois, and then the Duke's Mayo Bowl on January 3rd. After all of the other bowls, Minnesota and Virginia Tech take on one another for the right to douse their coach in mayonnaise.
So you want to know what I got out of all of that you put out there, Sam?
What?
I heard Michigan versus Alabama Rose Bowl revenge game 2.0. That's all I heard. That's all I heard. We're getting the Rose Bowl part 2. We're gonna see why Alabama should have been in the playoffs. To every Roll Tide fan out there.
Yes, because if they win by 2 touchdowns, look, we did something Ohio State couldn't done. We should have taken their spot.
We beat the defending national champion. How much you want to bet the college football playoff committee is going to be like they had an emergency meeting? We got to put him back in.
Well, they're in the semifinals. They're now a Final Four team.
just go ahead and put them in there. Just tell them to take the season off. They're in.
They get the bye into the championship.
And they would do it too. Man, would they do it so fast.
But of these games, I would say probably the South Carolina Illinois game I'd be most interested to watch of all these games that involve Big Ten teams. But I'll keep my eye on. They play at different times too. But Michigan, and I'll watch a little bit of the Michigan Alabama game too, just to see what teams are showing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I say I have 4 that I would be pretty interested in watching.
I'll watch parts of all of them probably.
Yeah, I say I would like to watch the USC versus Texas A&M. I feel like that would be interesting. Obviously, Nebraska versus Boston College. I got to go with the black and yellow game of Iowa versus Mizzou. And then, yeah, I think Illinois versus South Carolina, because if anybody watched those last few South Carolina games of the season, Lenore Sellers, the freshman quarterback, was absolutely lighting up the SEC, and he is a very bright future, I think, in both college football and potentially the NFL.
I honestly, if it wouldn't have been SMU, I would have said it should have been South Carolina in the playoff rather than Alabama. Ooh, hot take there. I don't care. I don't care what your wins are. It's how, yeah, okay. I do care, but I also care more about how you're playing at the time that this blessed event of the CFP bracket and tournament is going to take place. And right now, I take South Carolina over Alabama on that. I really do. It's not even a choice in my mind.
They're saying at least South Carolina, 2 of their losses were less than 3 points each. You know, they only lost by a field goal to LSU, and then they only lost by 2 to Alabama. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head what their third loss was to.
And Alabama fans are, we beat them. We beat them. I don't care.
Oh, yeah, I heard that.
I don't care.
Believe me, I saw it all in my comments. Why would SC get in? We got the head-to-head over them. Head-to-head just don't matter.
That doesn't guarantee you every time.
Yes, it does. We're the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Okay, it goes into play in the comparison, but then you also go, okay, how have they done in like opponents? How have they done in the past 5? Because I tell you what, South Carolina won 6 in a row to end that season, and that's pretty darn good.
They're
fantastic. Playing very well.
After losing 2 points to Alabama, and then they went into a number 10 ranked Texas A&M and whooped them by over 20 points.
So I really don't care. I will accept that you are. I will concede that Alabama beat South Carolina. I concede that, and I don't care.
You know what I heard?
South Carolina was a better playoff pick had SMU gotten booted.
I heard you don't give a pee about nothing but the Tide. That's what I heard.
I don't care. But it's bowl games. Bowl season's always fun. I just am amazed that within today's Friday the 13th, within the next week we'll be playing bowl games, and that's that.
They say that's it for a lot of the college teams.
Well, a week from now we're playing. A week from today we're playing CFP games.
Yeah.
Well, one. Anyways.
One. Yeah. IU versus Notre Dame. Yep. Big Ten team.
Yep. But
and future Big Ten team.
Yeah, definitely.
Manifesting it into existence. Future Big Ten football team.
It's going to happen.
They're already in Big Ten hockey. Just go ahead and just quit dipping your toes in the pool. Just jump in.
Is Johns Hopkins is part of the Big Ten. Did you know that?
I did for
lacrosse.
Lacrosse. That's right.
Yep, they were Big Ten champions last year. But yeah, this is definitely I will watch almost any football. I really will when it's on. But I am just this bowl season is lost what it used to mean when I was growing up to the point of okay, I like when my team or there's a good game on. But it's not like, hey, I'm going to sit down in front of my TV on New Year's Day and just fill it with just senseless bowl games, just one after another, and love watching it because the pride isn't there near as much anymore. It just isn't. And that's not, it's a creature of the system now. There were 82 bowl eligible teams and 82 slots. So everybody that had at least 6 wins got to go bowling no matter where it was, so I don't know of any programs that chose not to be in a bowl game, but that just meant Wisconsin didn't make it.
Right. And I know we've talked about this for probably the last couple of years as far as because they've always been worried about, how do we make the bowl games more exciting? How do we get people to tune in more? Put them in during the regular season.
Or put them at the beginning of the year.
At the beginning, like something.
Kickoff specials.
Yeah. Like
the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl kickoff special.
Yeah. And do it for like a lot of the, and heck, even like I said, do it at maybe the beginning of the schedule when, teams like the Big Ten or the SEC face off against teams that they normally don't face off against. Like Alabama's schedule's dropped. Their very first game, they face Florida State. Make that a bowl game. The very first LSU game is LSU versus Clemson.
Give Make Florida that State a bowl game after a 2-9 season.
They deserved it. They went 13-0 and then got destroyed by Georgia and destroyed by everybody after that. And then
since they got shafted out of the playoffs last year, they are 2-10.
And barring anything crazy happen from our college football playoff bracket predictions that we made, next year at the beginning of the season, we have Ohio State versus Texas.
Yeah,
that's a massive game.
Yeah,
think about the bowl game you can make that.
Make that the Rose Bowl special. Play it in Pasadena.
There you go. So make it neutral? Not neutral. That means someone doesn't have home field advantage.
No, that's going to be a good game, though. I really do think it's going to be a fantastic game between the Longhorns and Buckeyes at the Shoe.
At the home of
week zero. Week 0.
World famous Ohio State Buckeyes.
Maybe it's week O.
Week O for OH.
N-O. That's what I always yell when everybody says something. O-H-N-O.
Have you ever seen the comedian that does that? He's like, have you ever met these people from Ohio? He goes, it has to take 2 people to spell their state. They have 4 letters.
Greg Warren. That's who it is. It's Greg Warren. It's,
okay.
He's a great comedian.
I have a buddy that's an Ohio State fan. I send that to him every time I turn around, and he always laughs. He goes, I'm not going to deny it. He goes, I even make the joke too. He goes, I still participate.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Well, let's use a few minutes to jump over to the hardwood for the Big Ten there, Tony. Looking at some college basketball, the standings. There's a new team atop the men's Big Ten standings, and I say that because there are 3 2-0 teams, one 1-0 team
Hmm.
in league play. But let's look at their overall. The UCLA Bruins coming in at 8-1, 2-0 in the conference at this point. Tony, well, I say we as in Big Talk has talked about the Bruins are going to be a contender for the Big Ten
Hmm.
this season.
Yeah, I mean, you look at UCLA, and honestly, look at Oregon as well. Oregon they're all the way up to rank number 12. Now they are 1-1 in conference, but overall
Mm-hmm.
they're 9-1. They're one of the top teams in the country right now. So I mean,
Yep.
and just looking at it historically, UCLA has always been really good. And some people may or may not kind of notice this as far as a trend goes, but typically if your school is really bad in football, they're usually really good in basketball. Purdue is primarily a basketball school. Look at Maryland, look at UCLA.
How
Like,
dare you say my Boilermakers are not good at football?
what was your record, sir? What was
No,
your
go
record?
ahead. No, go
Okay.
ahead.
But no, nonetheless though, I mean, and this is probably what to me made it the most exciting about the expansion of the different conferences, is because now you have all of these other basketball conference games that, don't get me wrong, with basketball it's a little bit easier to kind of schedule these interconference matchups, because usually you have like the Big 12 versus the SEC, and then like the Big 10 versus the ACC matchups and whatnot. So you get to see a lot of these really cool and interesting games anyway. But for UCLA to come in already, and they're actually the only team that handed Oregon its first loss, and they won 73-71. So that says a lot right there, that they're already coming in and making a huge statement against their former Pac-12 member, but now also current Big 10 member. So I'm excited for it. And in all honesty, I mean, UCLA, that's the biggest thing we've talked about the Big Ten for probably about the last 4 or 5 years, is there's never really a true, other than Purdue the last few years, there's never really been a true like, oh man, this is probably the favorite not only to win the Big Ten, but this is the favorite to win the national title.
Well, I'm not going to go as far as to say UCLA is ready to be national title contenders.
No, I don't know about that, but you never know. Never know.
Now, and yes, I misspoke at the top. If you look at overall record, Oregon technically has the better record. They also are 1-1 though in the Big Ten, so that's why they fell down further in the
Standings.
seedings. So or standings, so to speak. But IU and Nebraska have only played one conference game at this point. IU is 1-0, Nebraska is 0-1. But a lot of teams doing well. The one that jumped out to me the most, Tony, and we kind of mentioned this before we took over or hit the air. Michigan Wolverines are sitting at 8-2. They won 8 ball games all year last year. So right now, Dusty May has the Wolverines definitely on the right track, going towards a much improved record, maybe even a tournament bid. They did lose a big lead against Arkansas their last time out, and ended up getting beat by 2 to the Razorbacks. But still, last year that wouldn't have happened.
No. And does that go to show you, that it really was Juwan Howard holding that team back?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we talked about it when I thought it was a big issue when Hunter Dickinson left Michigan to go to Kansas. Which, by the way, I have a really good friend. She pointed out a good thing. How is Hunter Dickinson still in college? Isn't that man like 45? Hasn't he been
He's
there
got
since like
grandkids that are coming into elementary school?
like that man did almost 4 years in Michigan and is now in his second year as Kansas. Ow! But
he's got his red shirt year and
COVID
his COVID year.
That's it, because I don't think he's been injured.
Last year that they have COVID eligibility, so we got that to look for. Should. I'm sure there will be some extreme
exceptions,
but yeah, it's the Wolverines looking really good at this point. They're 5-0 on the road, or at home, 1-0 on the road. They got beat at a neutral site. Excuse me, neutral site for the game against Arkansas. Penn State They're sitting at 8-2. They've got a big win over Purdue where they just absolutely housed Purdue. It wasn't even as close as the 11 points for the final score was. But then they go and they play Rutgers and they get beat. Rutgers again. Big Talks talked about Rutgers, and we think they could be a dark horse, not necessarily to win it. Now, could they jump and bite and pull a Northwestern to where all of a sudden they're sitting number 2? Yeah, I think they could. But they're going to win some games they shouldn't. But I think also Steve Peichel has that team ready to play, but there are going to be some games that they should win, and they get bit. They get bitten at the end.
I feel like between them and Maryland, when it's funny because I said this 2 years ago too, and 2 years ago for whatever reason, both teams surpassed my expectations. I was like, man, I feel like Maryland and Rutgers are my 2 dark horses, and I think I'm gonna stick with that again. I did that last year, and it came back to bite me hard. This year, a little bit more confident in it though.
Yeah, Maryland had a struggle last year, and
did they ever?
Rutgers underachieved a touch.
I'm like, what happened? You guys had so much momentum. I'm like, okay, you guys got it, and then. I'm like, all right.
But Purdue sitting at 8-2. They've got a game tomorrow against Texas A&M. Another game against a ranked opponent. Matt Painter's starting to do exactly what Tom Izzo has done for years, to where he is scheduling very, very hard preseason games or preseason non-conference games. And some people forget Purdue's 8-2. They lost to Marquette in Milwaukee, so it was a home game for Marquette. And then they lost to Penn State in Penn State. They beat Alabama, and Alabama was number 2 in the country at the time. They've beaten some good teams here in the early goings. And North Carolina State, not horrible at all. And then who was the other
they
team?
They beat a ranked Old Miss. It was 20. Miss. That was number 23.
Yeah, and so they play a good hard schedule. I think when it comes to the fact that you're going to lose games in the Big Ten, UCLA, none of these teams are going undefeated in the Big Ten. You're going to lose. I honestly would say a 13-5 team is probably close, if not the Big Ten champion, because I think there are a lot of teams that are just going to beat up on one another, and they're going to have some lower conference records, but they're going to be battle tested and ready to play come March. And people have said, well, this is the Big Ten. You got to take something into consideration. The Big Ten accepted in 4 new teams this year that play a different style of basketball than the traditional Big Ten. So they're going to get at least 4, if not more, games against these non-traditional Big Ten teams in their Big Ten season, and it's going to make them a little bit more road ready to go into the big dance and play against teams that don't play a traditional Big Ten style of basketball.
Yeah, and I do agree. Looking at what Matt Painter has done, because if you kind of look at Michigan State's schedule this year too, Michigan State, they did have 2 really tough opponents. You had the number 1 team at one point in Kansas. They lost by 8 to them in a neutral site. And then they also ended up losing to Memphis by 8, also in a neutral site. But then they turned around and they beat North Carolina. I can't remember if that was at home in the Breslin Center or if that was on a neutral site.
I want to say it was at the Little Caesar, but maybe I'm wrong.
It might have been. I'm like, it doesn't seem like that might be. But I mean, he's kind of let up, because now their next few games after beating Nebraska is Oakland, FAU, and Western Michigan. Now FAU, that might be a little bit of a tough one. I know they were just in the national, the Final Four, or no, they were in the national title game, weren't they?
Who?
FAU.
No, they made it to the Final Four and got beat by San Diego State a couple years
ago. That's right. So, I mean, that's also a still pretty solid team. But I do kind of wonder about my Spartans, though, because I'm like, okay, you guys always
the game against North Carolina was in Maui. It was the third place game in Hawaii.
Okay. But nonetheless, it does make me a little worried about my Spartans, because, like you said, usually Tom Izzo tries to go through like the hardest gauntlet ever. Like, let's take on basically all the top 10 teams in a row, and if we can come out like 5-5, that's a win. But But I do kind of wonder for the Spartans though, because they do have a little bit of a tough test because they have to go to Los Angeles to take on UCLA, and then they luckily get to host Oregon at the Breslin Center. So not too bad. And then they also get to host Purdue. They only have to face Purdue once, and they get to host them in the Breslin Center, which even you Purdue fans have been a little hesitant about having to go up to old East Lansing last couple of years.
Last couple of years, we've won both games.
That's true. Like I say, I can't.
I'm sorry, not both games because we only played once, but we won it there.
But look, you don't have a 9'10" shooter at the moment that's healthy to be able to just help you dominate either. So
Purdue's going to be fine.
Say doesn't mean that you probably still won't win, but I'm just want that out there. You don't have a 9'10"
you're
giant
correct.
anymore.
You're correct. But are there any surprises, good, bad, indifferent, with what you've seen from Big Ten teams at this point? Are there ever any teams that are underachieving, overachieving, or anything like that jumps out of the paper from you?
Not that I can tell right now. I mean, if we want to get historical, I mean Northwestern, because I mean, it seems like honestly, ever since they really made that big turnaround, Northwestern has been pretty consistent as far as being decent. I mean, they're 7-3 overall as it stands right now. 1-1 in the Big Ten. We kind of knew after. I cannot remember his name, and I'm awful for it. No, for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Real big shooter that they had for a real long time. It's like the heart and soul of the Hawkeyes.
I don't know.
But do you know who I'm talking about?
I sort of remember that.
It's like the coach's son, I think.
McCaffrey?
Yeah, McCaffrey. Ever since McCaffrey left, I feel like the Hawkeyes have kind of
which one? There are like 6 of them.
I know. Whatever the two was that had the Hawkeyes, like they were usually ranked in the top 25 for like a hot minute there. I feel like they're kind of
remember their names. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I don't either. I'm like I know
Dalton would know, but I don't.
Look, Dalton retired because he's a goat. He moved on to bigger and better things, but I know he would know for sure. Other than that, I mean, realistically, you look at this with the exception of UCLA being added in. I mean, this has typically been a lot of the standings for the Big Ten here of late, last few years anyway, with the exception of last year, Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, Penn State, Purdue, Maryland, all teams that we pretty much expected for the last few years to usually be up there towards the top anyway. I don't know if Nebraska may or may not be able to pull out kind of another like, oh, hey, we're here too, even though
I don't know.
Even though the one kid that we really liked watching,
Keisei Tominaga.
Exactly, even though he's not there anymore. But
yeah, he's now in the Pacers farm system. But he is. I honestly, my kind of surprise to this point for the Big Ten is because they've gotten 2 Big Ten games in and they've lost them both. Wisconsin was sitting at 8-1 before they started. Actually, I'm sorry, they were 8-0 coming in and lost the game prior to the Big Ten opener. Their big their Big Ten opener. Actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. They lost to Michigan. Then went on the road and lost at Marquette by 13, and then went on the road and got beat by Illinois. So they're 0-2, but their losses in the Big Ten aren't bad losses. I'm just kind of surprised that they've gone on to a 3-game losing streak after such a big start, beating number 9 Arizona at home the same night that Purdue beat number 2 Alabama that night. It was a big thing on Peacock because there were back-to-back games on Peacock, and both Big Ten teams upset the teams they were playing. But, I don't know that I'm really I'm not convinced that Wisconsin isn't going to be able to right the ship. They just wow, it just kind of surprised me that they hit that kind of a skid. But I guess knowing what you know from Michigan being improved and Illinois, that an unknown entity of so many different new players on their roster, you don't know what kind of team they're going to be. You still don't see those as bad losses. But with the way they were performing, I thought Wisconsin would be at least 1-1, if not 2-0 in the Big Ten. And here they come, sitting at 0-2 for the Big Ten up to this point.
But I think that's the beauty of both college basketball and really basketball as a whole is you can start out slow. It's just however you can right the ship and finish, because they could go on a 8-9 game win streak, and then we may come back here and go, well, they're probably one of the best teams in the conference because they may or may not be sitting there 9-2. Who knows?
Right,
we'll have to see how if I can speak, see how things go in over the next few weeks, next couple of months.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of about 3 months to get us into right around that tournament time, to where we're going to be posturing and talking about bubbles and seeding in the conference championship. Only the top 16 teams in the Big Ten get to go to the Big Ten tournament this season. So that means the bottom 2 teams in the conference standings will not play any postseason basketball, period, which is a change from what we're used to when it comes to the conference championship tournament. So, yeah, I think I'm ready for basketball season to get into full. I'm not hurrying football season, but I'm not as sad at the end of the football season as many are, because my favorite time of the year is coming.
Yeah, I say, and it is one of those two. Unless your team makes it to the playoffs for football, I say for most for most people, it's like, all right, football season's over, time to move on to basketball, because that's pretty much the only time now I get to root for my team again. So.
Yeah, it'll be a fun time coming, and fun time coming for all of us here as well. Just a real quick side note, here coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be formatting the show a little bit differently from what you are used to. We'll get into the ins and outs of what that means as we get a little closer to that, but it will be after the calendar flips to 2025. But wanted to let everybody know that it's going to be changing up a little bit.
Just a tiny bit. Big changes. B1G changes.
B1G changes. Big changes. But that brings us to the end of this week's show. So, Tony, I'm going to have you go ahead and let everybody know how they can get a hold of us.
Sure. You can find us on Facebook at Big Talk. That is B1G Talk on Facebook. You can also find us at Big Talk on Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and TikTok. Starting to upload more videos on the TikToks. Gotten some pretty good feedback so far on the TikToks there. Gotten a lot of spam that supposedly people are trying to sell their Indiana versus Notre Dame tickets. These things are like $800 a piece. There ain't no way. Those are all scams.
Is it because we have Big Talk or Big like B1G in our name or something? Because that makes no sense to me.
It doesn't matter. Even for me inside the Hoosier mind, almost every video I get a comment about that from a different account.
Anybody that's watching our reels, don't buy your tickets from them.
No, please don't.
From our reels, okay?
Yeah,
go to a reputable resale site and purchase your tickets there.
Yeah, we are not, quote, big enough to be selling stuff. We ain't got that type of budget yet. So don't. If anybody says that they're selling tickets on our page, fake news. Don't buy that. Don't do it. But anyway, you can find us on Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and the TikToks at B1G_talk. Big Talk. You can also find us every week on the All Sports All Plays network that you can also get on any Apple or Android app store that you have on your phone, so you can watch us on video too. And you will also be on the Lounge Media Group's Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts later on in the day, thanks to Sam and all of his hard work.
Okay, well, that brings us, like I mentioned, to the end of this week's show. For Tony Hollinsworth, I'm Sam Sprunger. Thanks for tuning in to Big Talk. We'll see you next week.